Hi there, Robert. How are you? I'm good, thank you. Are you? Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. It's so nice to see you again. I must tell you, thanks for the wonderful deaf role model interview that you did for us. It was so popular, it had so many views. I was honoured to take part. Well, today we wanted to talk to you more about your experiences because you've lived in so many different countries and you've met university students through your work from so many different backgrounds. And today we wanted to draw on your experience, thinking about how we can inspire and motivate young deaf people to apply to university and also to progress their studies to postgraduate or PhD level. So, my first question is you've worked in the UK, in Australia, in America. When you think about the students that you've met, what would you say was their inspiration? What motivated them to apply to university, but then also to progress their studies to those higher levels? Do you think the factors that played a part in their motivation is the same as in the UK, or is it different? I think society has a large part to play. Society's attitude towards deaf people, and that will affect the experience that deaf people have at university in terms of access. If a country has well established systems for providing interpreters, note takers, speech to text reporters, then it will be an easier journey when entering university, less of a struggle to fight for what you need. I think too, precedence plays a part. If there's a track record of deaf people studying at those levels, then it's easier to follow in their footsteps. When I think about in America, they have Gallaudet University, NTID, and other places like California State University. It's called Northridge. There's a large deaf presence there. And so when deaf people think about going to university, they've seen it done before and they want to do the same. In Australia, there was nothing like that. I think there was less encouragement for deaf people to reach out to university, and that shows in how many went. So I think society's attitude, but also how many people have achieved that, that plays a large part. That's lovely. I remember when I went to America as part of a research project, we visited the New York School for the Deaf, MSSD, the Rochester School for the Deaf, and something that really struck me was that in all of those places, they really focused on young deaf children around the age of 11 to explore their ideas about careers. They asked them, what would you like to do in the future? And they supported them. They gave them guidance in line with what those deaf children said. They never said, oh, you wouldn't be able to do that because you're deaf. They really gave them a sense of aspiration. Do you think deaf children need more of those discussions, more encouragement to think about their choices and options for the future? And what can we as deaf adults do to support them to reach out for their dreams? Well, I think any good school should have a careers advice service. I think it's important because in Britain and Australia, I don't know if they have a good tradition of talking to deaf children about what they want to do as adults. They don't tell them all the options are on the table. And I think too, deaf role models, like you were saying, play such a large part. We can do things as adults. I think back to in America, like I was saying before, deaf people went to university, but they also then attained high level positions. They became teachers, head teachers, lecturers, professionals, lawyers. And I think if we can show that to deaf children, ask them what they'd like to do and show them that deaf people have done that, that really inspires them, and that would be the role of a career service. Yeah, I think it's so important that deaf children are encouraged to think about their futures, because if they don't, they are lost. There's no guidance, and that's really important. Yeah, I think back to when I was in mainstream secondary school, we had a career service, and they asked me what I wanted to do, and they asked me about what I would like to get involved in the future, and they helped me to explore those desires of mine, my interests, and I think that's really important. It's important that you think about your interests and go along with that. I think back to when I was embarking on my PhD, someone said to me, make sure you choose something that you're going to be interested in. It's a passion project, because it's the only thing that people are going to want to talk to you about over the next 10 years. And I think that's true for deaf children making those choices. They have to think, this is going to be my path for the next 10 to 20 years. So it has to be something that I'm interested in. That's great. I know when I was in America, it was so interesting for me because we've talked before about when we were young, we didn't really feel that we had role models, deaf role models. But in those schools that I visited, they had a structured program for bringing deaf people in to do presentations, or maybe they were in residence for a week or a month. And it really gave deaf children an opportunity to spend time with them and to look up to them as role models. Why do you think that deaf role models are so important? Yeah, they definitely are vital, and I know that for myself. When I was at school and I was thinking about university, there was no one who had gone to university, let alone studying at master's or PhD level. Literally in Australia, no one had gone to university at that time. I think in Britain, some people had gone on and achieved their degrees, but I don't think anybody had achieved a long-lasting career at those levels. And that really did affect me, and I think it's true for anybody from a marginalised community. They need to see people that reflect them, don't they? So anyone from a black or a minority ethnic group, they want to see adults that they can see themselves in. So I think that's true for deaf children too. They have to see that within the community. Yeah, for me, it was just interesting in America. It didn't happen by chance. It was something that they structured, and children could ask them questions and they could engage with those ones. Yeah, I think that's so important they have that level of access provided for them, because hearing children, they have that. They're able to talk to their parents, friends, people in the community, talk to their teachers, but deaf children don't have that. So having something in place to provide that for them, giving them that chance to talk to deaf adults and find out about their lives and their stories is so important. Before you were telling me about your mother, who was deaf herself, she really wanted you to have a good education. What do you think about nowadays? How can we help parents, whether they're deaf or hearing, to really give the right support to improve things for their deaf child? Well, I think the key is literacy. I think it's the one constant throughout someone's life, and it's the ticket to furthering themselves. If they can read and write, if they can access subtitles, they can read things and become independent and become comfortable with reading and writing. And that's going to stand them in such good stead, open so many doors for them. They're only going to achieve that strong literacy skill through having a strong foundation in sign language from an early age. That will then help them to access reading and writing. And of course, it's a lot of work. And any family, whether their parents are hearing or deaf, are going to have to put in a lot of work to help them gain those literacy skills. But I think the important thing too is to make it fun, so that they have fond memories of engaging with the English language. It shouldn't be a laborious task. It's important to give them those skills, but also to have fun while doing it. Do it through socializing with others as well. That's great. Well, now you're working at Hariot Wall University in Edinburgh, and you're also very involved with the WFD. Congratulations on that. Just wondering whether you've seen anything as good practice or best practice for encouraging and supporting deaf young people in accessing higher education. Is there anything that we could learn as a country? I think one thing that we need is more deaf schools. I've always believed that mainstream schooling does a good job, but it's not a replacement for having a fully accessible deaf space to learn, where all the children are different from different communities, but they have a similar life experience. And I think that's more important than learning alongside hearing peers. I think some places, they have large amounts of deaf children, they have deaf teachers, deaf head teachers, they have those role models in place. And that really is a different attitude to what we're seeing nowadays. I remember in Tokyo, I visited a bilingual school. They didn't have anything like that previously, and the community set it up. And it's been really successful. When I visited, I had lunch with these little Japanese deaf children. There was me as a huge giant sitting and signing with them. And their confidence was just beautiful. They had such confidence in engaging with others through sign language because that was their fully accessible environment to learn. Well, my last question is, if you were standing in front of an audience of young deaf children who were perhaps curious about going to university, what would you say to encourage them to reach out for those goals? I think follow your gut. That's such an important thing for me. I think you have to be interested in what you're going to do. So when you have options about what you want to do for your courses, it has to relate to something that you enjoy. And then you'll be interested in learning about it. If you choose something that you don't enjoy, you're not interested in, then it's always going to be a task. Whether your parents told you or your teacher told you, you really have to look inside and think, follow your heart. I look back to when I was at school and I was making choices surrounding my A-levels. I ended up going more towards maths and science, which I enjoyed, but it really was because the teachers told me to choose those. And looking back, I really wish I'd followed more studies in literature or psychology or history, something more book-based. That's the path I would have really enjoyed. So that's the advice I would give. Follow your heart. Well, thank you, Robert, so much for chatting with us today and for your time.
Firstly, just love to say thank you very much for coming on board with us. I know you're a strong ally to the deaf community, and you're also a champion of inclusion and diversity. And looking at your background, your roles that you've had have been linked very much to engagement and representation. You've been Minister for Young Citizens and Youth Engagement, Shadow Minister of Diverse Communities, and Shadow Secretary of State for Women and Equalities. So you've done a vast array of roles, and you're also the first person to ask a question in BSL in 2017 in Parliament, which was a massive thing for the deaf community, and it was fantastic to have that allyship, basically. So yeah, it's fantastic. And obviously as a part of that, wanting BSL to be more out there, really, to enable the deaf community to access all of society. So really my first question, I suppose, should be is, why have you focused so much of your career on the issues of diversity and representation?
Thank you. I think because when I was at college, there were 2 deaf people in my class. So I learned to sign my name, but nothing else. And although I tried to engage with them as much as I could, I think a part of me always felt guilty that I could have done more. And I think, like, if society is going to be better, if we can do something to help somebody else, then we should. And it's important to me. In fact, it's very important to me that everybody has as much access to life, to information. We all have certain privileges, and our society is, in the main, built for people who are hearing. And so it's important that those of us who can hear advocate strongly for those who are deaf. What I've learned a lot over the years, especially over the last couple of years, where we talk about privileges, you know, whether you have a privilege because you're not in a wheelchair, or you have a privilege because of your accent, or you have a privilege because of your gender, or privilege because of the color of your skin. You may not have asked for those privileges, but you have them. And what's important is, what are you going to do with those privileges? The government is failing at the moment, and it makes me really angry, because whenever there is a statement, especially now in a pandemic, it costs very little for it to be inclusive to people who are deaf. It costs very little, but it can literally save lives.
What more would you like to see from, I suppose, the government and local leaders in order to support and champion, you know, deaf leaders?
I want to see more deaf leaders taking centre stage. We've got a very good Harrow and Brent Deaf Club, and we use them a lot. And I want people to just understand the importance of inclusion.
Well, just thank you very much, Dawn. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for giving out your time, because I know you are very, very busy.
I have long empathised with the deaf community as a marginalised and disenfranchised group. Deaf people are not only deaf, they are black, brown and from ethnic minorities. They are poor and rich. They are men and women. They are LGBTQ+. The list of intersectionality could go on. For this reason, the challenges deaf people face are not as simple as writing on a piece of paper or putting captions on a video. They are multi-layered and complex social issues, made more so by years of being ignored by those with the influence to effect change. I believe strongly that deaf people not only need a seat at the table when it comes to supporting and equipping them for success, they need to be at the front of the movement. I was honoured to be asked to be part of this digital series championing deaf leadership and sharing knowledge and insights on this remarkable community. I look forward to supporting Deaf Unity's initiatives going forward.
On our website, we have a monthly feature called Deaf Role Models. We feature inspirational deaf people from around the globe who have a story to tell and inspiration to share. Since 2013, we've interviewed and featured so many deaf role models. We wanted to give you a snapshot of the wonderful deaf men and women who contribute to deaf gain and our beautiful deaf community. Shreen Hussain. Shreen is the first woman to graduate from university with an MA in the country of Jordan. Jordan, in 2013, had approximately 30,000 deaf people, and only around 50% at that time had access to primary education. So Shreen's achievement is really fantastic. She's now an educator and gives back to the deaf community in Jordan by working with the government to improve educational provisions. Chris Kubwimana. Chris was born in Burundi, Central Africa, and has an amazing story to tell about being exiled, his experiences as a refugee, and subsequently coming to the UK and establishing his organisation, Aurora Deaf Aid Africa. His work is focused on supporting deaf and disabled people in Africa. Penny Beskitzer. Penny is a well-known figure in the UK deaf community. As an experienced trainer, teacher, and mentor, Penny has inspired many deaf young people to reach out for their dreams. Penny worked with Deaf Unity on our groundbreaking mentoring program and continues to inspire deaf people through her example each day. Jonathan Coe. Jonathan is a tech wizard and has an inspirational story to tell about his educational journey and how he was able to make a success of university and really excel in his chosen career. Dr. Justine Durno. Justine is a true example of what a deaf person can achieve if they have the grit and determination to meet every challenge head on. She's a medical doctor who works in London and is an inspiration on a daily basis. She even addressed the UN in 2020, bringing deaf people and our issues to the main floor. Alison Hendry. Alison is a fantastic source of inspiration for young people. She had various challenges navigating her deafness and her educational journey, but was able to succeed. She now works as a BSL Development Officer at Edinburgh University, promoting BSL and its values in education and the wider society. To read more about these role models and many more, visit our website. If you would like to propose someone to be featured as a role model of the month, get in touch with us.